Hello, payroll students. This is Professor Lackmeyer, and I just thought I would go over a couple of examples on Chapter 2. So if you go out onto our Canvas homepage under Unit 1, Chapters 1 and 2, you should see under the Chapter 2 information, kind of between the adaptive learning plan and the homework, you should see a link to the Chapter 2 practice now. So if you go ahead and click that, it will open up your Chapter 2 practice in Cengage. So you can actually open it and work along with me if you would like. So with Chapter 2, when we're trying to calculate wages, I'm going to minimize this over here. We're just going to go in and calculate some overtime and regular earnings, learn about tipped employee calculations, and a couple of other key concepts. So when you're in payroll, as you've probably seen in the first chapter, or as you've started Chapter 2, they do have some nice little examples at the beginning here. So they have an example of someone who's paid an hourly rate of $18.50 and worked 49 hours. So they show you how to calculate regular and overtime earnings to get total gross pay. So here we're doing that for 5 employees. So we have wages and hour information for 5 employees for the week ended July 7th. Employees do work a standard 40-hour work week and are paid time and 1/2 for all hours over 40 in a work week. So for each employee, we're going to calculate their regular earnings, the overtime rate that they earn, their overtime earnings, and then we're going to add regular plus overtime to get the total gross earnings. Now, while you're in Cengage, if you're not as familiar working in Cengage, if you don't know how to complete a problem, you have some resources. So if you move your mouse over the ebook, it tells you which objective this is in for Chapter 2. You could click on that and open up the ebook to that learning objective. This particular problem has a show me how video, so it'll walk you through completing it. And you can also open the calculator. So I'm going to open up the calculator so you can kind of see my calculations. So regular earnings are pretty easy. Regular earnings should be up to 40 hours. So since this first T, Carmen, has earned 47 hours, their regular earnings would just be the 40-hour regular work week times their regular hourly wage rate. So for regular earnings, take 40 hours times $12.45, and you should get $498 of regular earnings. Now the next step is to calculate the overtime rate. This is how much they'll get paid, which is time and a half. So we'll take their regular hourly rate of $12.45 times 1.5, or time and a half. So we will see their overtime rate should be $18, and we will round it to 2 decimals. So $18.68. And it'll tell you, in this case, it says round your answers to 2 decimal places and then use those rounded answers in subsequent computations. So that's one of the biggest errors I see in payroll is rounding. If you're using Excel to do some of these calculations, if you don't do a round function, it will keep that 3rd decimal even if it's not showing it. And so your calculations could be wrong. So if you're using a standard calculator, obviously I see on the screen, I'm going to round that. And then when I calculate their overtime earnings, I want to use the rounded overtime pay. So I'll take the $18.68. T. Carmen works 7 hours of overtime. Multiply that by 7. Overtime is $130.76. From there, to get total gross earnings, I'm just going to take their overtime earnings plus the $498 in regular earnings. So T. Carmen's total gross earnings are $628.76. Okay. Now that we've done that example, I'm going to kind of breeze through the other 4 a little more quickly for time's sake. So again, I would just start over with Glasso here, or Galasso. So 40 hours times their regular wages, $11.90. $476 in regular earnings. Overtime rate, $11.90 times 1.5. 17.85 times 2 hours of overtime, and their overtime earnings $35.70, plus regular earnings of $476. Total gross earnings $511.70. B. Jones, regular earnings 40 hours times 1085, $434. Overtime rate $10.85 times 1.5. I'm going to round that to $16.28. $16.28 times what? 8 hours of overtime. Overtime earnings $130.24, plus my regular $434 earnings. Total gross earnings $564.24. For G. Rodna, we would take 40 hours times 1125 for the regular earnings of $450. Overtime rate $11.25 times 1.5, $16.88 rounded. $16.88 times 4 overtime hours. Overtime earnings $67.52. I'll add that to the $450 of regular. $517.52 are the total gross earnings for G. Rodna. And the last employee, W. Willman. So here, regular earnings 40 hours times 1340, $536. Overtime rate $13.40 times 1.5. $20.10 would be the overtime rate. Willman had 5.5 hours of overtime times the overtime rate. Overtime earnings $110.55, plus the $536 of regular earnings. So total gross earnings for W. Willman $646.55. Your last step, Part B, is to compute the total gross earnings for all employees. So we're truly just adding up those 5 amounts. So I will quickly type in all 5 of those and add them up. And we should get $2,868.77. You can always use the check my work as many times as you need in your homework, and it will tell you if you're right or wrong. So we got all of that correct, so we're going to move on to the next one. As you can see, we just have 4 problems we're doing. So the second one, we're dealing with a tipped employee. So tipped employees are a little bit different as far as how overtime and regular wages are calculated. So you can read, if you look in the ebook, again, it's Objective 4, so you can read about how tipped employee rates are calculated. So just in general, the employer is still responsible for paying an employee even when they earn tips. Okay? They do take what we call a tip credit against the minimum wage because an employee does earn those tips, which count towards their weekly rate. So as long as they're earning enough tips to get to the $5.12 tip credit, then we're paying them $2.13 per hour. And how they're coming up with that is they're taking the minimum wage of $7.25 and they're subtracting out that tip credit, that $5.12. So that's how they're getting the $2.13 pay that is given to all tipped employees. So in this case, we want to calculate the pay for 40 hours and overtime pay for a waitress at the Hole in the Wall restaurant. So Gabrielle Hunter worked 42 hours and collected over $500 in tips. The restaurant uses the full tip credit against the minimum wage and pays Hunter the minimum required for tipped employees. Okay? So as long as they're earning tips to make at least $5.12 per hour, we're paying them $2.13 an hour. And you can always calculate that, you know, if they made $500 in tips, you know, you could divide it by the 40 if it was a regular week and ensure that she is making more than that minimum. So her regular wages are always the same for a tipped employee if they work full time. So right here in the example, you can kind of see the calculation. So all tipped employees working a normal 40-hour week, or even if they work overtime, their regular pay is 40 hours times $2.13. So we don't even have to calculate that. We can just put in pay for 40 hours, $85.20. Now to calculate the overtime pay, it is different for a tipped employee. Notice in the example here that the tipped employee is getting overtime pay of $5.76. This is the standard overtime rate for a tipped employee. So if you're asking, well, how did they calculate that? I will show you. So they took the minimum wage of $7.25 an hour, and they calculated the overtime rate for minimum wage. So multiplied it by 1.5. So rounded, a normal employee making minimum wage would receive $10.88 per hour for overtime. Well, since these are tipped employees, we're going to take that minimum wage overtime rate and subtract out the $5.12 tipped credit. That's where they're getting the $5.76 because it is a rounded amount. So all tipped employees are going to receive $5.76 for overtime. In this case, it's 2 hours. So the overtime is $11.52. Moving along, our next one is also pretty simple as far as the calculations. They're giving you in the example how to calculate it. So what we do is it gives us Cal DiMangino earns $2,875 each month and works 40 hours each week. They want us to calculate the hourly rate that he earns as well as the overtime rate. So, and it does tell us again, we're going to round all divisions to 2 decimal places, and then we're going to use those rounded amounts in subsequent computations. So again, to calculate this, we are going to follow these steps right here in the example. So we are going to start by converting his monthly salary to a weekly rate. Okay, well, it's pretty easy. We are going to first annualize that monthly rate. So $2,875 is what he earns monthly, times 12 months. So Cal's annual salary is $34,500. Okay, so we'd probably make note of that, $34,500 for an annual salary. And then to turn that into a weekly rate or a weekly salary, we're going to divide it by 52 weeks. So then his weekly salary, we want to round to 2 decimals. So that'd be $663.46 is his weekly salary. 663.46. Step 2 actually. Step 2, we're going to take that weekly salary and divide it by 40 hours to get an hourly rate. So the hourly rate is $16.59 rounded to 2 decimals. So we just calculated part A here, $16.59. From there, it's the same to calculate overtime rate that you would for any hourly employee. So we take 16.59 times 1.5, and the overtime rate would be $24.89. Now they don't have us doing step 4, but you could then take, if he had worked overtime, you could use the regular hourly rate and the overtime rate to calculate his overtime pay. So his regular weekly earnings would still be the $663.46, and then you would calculate overtime using this overtime rate, and then you can add them together to get gross pay. And now, last but not least, we are going to look at a piecemeal situation, just to kind of get an idea of, if we do a piece rate system, how those earnings work and how they're different from earning regular wages. So as you can see, in this case, we have a worker, Erin Mills, who worked 45.5 hours and produced 1,275 units under a piece rate system. Under piece rate systems, employees are going to earn money based on a per unit fee. You know, they're earning based on how many units they produce. In this case, the regular piece rate is 45 cents a unit. But given that they are a non-exempt employee, we still need to pay Erin for any overtime that she has worked. So it's just a little more tricky, because how do you calculate an overtime rate when they're paid by the unit that they complete? Well, as you can see in example 2-23 above, it does give us some steps to actually calculate that. So we are going to use these steps and calculate Erin's piece rate earnings based on what was produced in this week, and then we're going to calculate a regular hourly rate and an overtime hourly rate to calculate Erin's overtime earnings. So to start with the piecework earnings, as you can see in step 1, you're truly just going to take, the units produced, in this case 1,275 units, times the price per unit, so times 0.45. So her piecework earnings, or his piecework earnings, are $573.75. So that's how much Erin earned for completing 1,275 units. To calculate the regular hourly rate of pay, we're just going to take those regular weekly earnings, that regular piece rate, the 573.75, and divide it by the total hours worked. So this is total hours worked. So 573.75 divided by 45.5. So now we get $12.61. That's the regular hourly rate, rounded to 2 decimals. Okay, so we took the total piecework earnings divided by total hours worked, 45.5, and the regular hourly rate is $12.61. Well, to calculate the overtime rate, we are truly just going to divide by 2, okay? Or multiply by 0.5. It's either way you want to look at it. So here we're just looking at what extra amount is Erin working or earning on those 5.5 hours. She's already been paid the $12.61 per hour. So we're only looking at the overtime hourly rate. So 12.61, again, you can multiply by 0.5 or divide by 2, but the overtime rate is $6.31. So this has been a little different than our standard overtime rate, because normally we pay people at 40 hours a week at their normal rate per hour, and then any overtime hours, we take their overtime rate of time and a half. Well, in this case, Erin's already earned money on, her regular earnings in those 5.5 hours of overtime. So what we're doing here is calculating just an overtime hourly rate. So she'll earn an additional $6.31 for each hour over 40. So 5.5 hours of overtime times $6.31. Her overtime earnings are $34.71. We would then add that together, so 573.75 plus $34.71. Total earnings are $608.46. And again, we could check our work. So the piece rate system just works a little bit differently, but you do have this guide and then the steps above. So if you have any other questions on Chapter 2 homework, please feel free to email me and I'd be happy to walk you through it, or I can even create a video example of the homework problem that you're struggling with and post that to Cengage. I hope you enjoy Chapter 2. Thank you.